Kelli was eating fruit, yogurt, and dairy. She was skipping breakfast to reduce her calories. She was doing what she genuinely believed was healthy. She was also gaining weight, losing her hair, struggling through brain fog so thick she couldn't keep up with her 6 and 7-year-old kids, and feeling physically depleted in a way she'd never felt before. She'd also had 2 major surgeries in the previous 18 months, and she was 40 years old, juggling 2 young children and a full life, and quietly wondering if this was just what her body did now. In 12 weeks, Kelli lost weight, and she described basically as it being effortless. Her brain fog cleared, her energy returned. She felt, in her words, like her body was finally repairing itself instead of breaking down. And the reason it felt effortless? We didn't restrict her. We fed her more. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how that works and why it's probably the opposite of what you've been told to do. I'm Loz Antonenko, health and performance coach, and the story I just described, eating what looks like a healthy diet and still gaining weight, still exhausted and still stuck, is one of the most common presentations I see in women in their 30s and 40s, particularly in women who are juggling a lot, who are putting themselves last, who are good at eating on the run, skipping meals, making choices based on what they think is good rather than what their specific body actually needs. The fix is almost never what they expect though. It was definitely not what Kelli expected. By the end of this video, you're going to understand why undereating is one of the most common hidden causes of weight gain and brain fog in women over 35, why what you think is healthy might actually be working against your specific body, and the 3-part framework we used with Kelli that created effortless results. No restriction, no meal plan policing, no suffering. Here's how this video is laid out. First, I'm going to explain the undereating trap, what it is, why it's so common in busy women, and why it creates exactly the symptoms Kelli was experiencing. Then, I'll walk you through the fuck-free Flexi Food Framework, the nutritional structure we use and why flexibility matters more than precision. And then, the recovery fueling piece, because Kelli's post-surgery depletion was a specific and important layer of her situation that I want to address for anyone in a similar position. And finally, her full timeline, results, and exactly where to start if this is you. Let's go. When Kelli came to me, she was 40 years old. 2 kids, 6 and 7, the kind of life where every day has about 4 more things than there's time for. She wasn't someone who didn't care about her health. She cared a lot. She was making what she thought was good decisions. Fruit in the morning, yogurt as a snack, dairy at meals. She was skipping breakfast specifically because she believed that eating less in the morning would help her lose weight. She called it fasting. She'd heard many times from lots of friends that was going to work and totally believed it. But the weight wasn't shifting. In fact, it was slowly creeping in the wrong direction. Her energy was low, not just tired, but the kind of flat, grey exhaustion where you keep pushing through the day on willpower and collapse at the end. She was struggling to keep up with her kids physically, which was actually causing her some distress. And the brain fog, her words, was significant. Difficulty concentrating, forgetting things, feeling like she was operating at about 60% of her capacity. And then add 2 major surgeries in 18 months. General anesthetic is a significant physiological stress, right? Surgery is trauma to the body, and recovery from that, real recovery, requires very specific nutritional support that most post-surgical patients are never given guidance on. Kelli was trying to eat healthy while her body was simultaneously managing surgical recovery, energy demands from 2 young kids, and a nutritional framework that was quietly working against her. She wasn't failing. The strategy was failing. And those are 2 very different things. Let me explain what I mean by the undereating trap, because I think this is one of the most important and least discussed topics in women's health and nutrition. Most women who come to me have been given at some point in their lives a version of the same advice. Eat less to weigh less. Reduce calories, skip breakfast if you're not hungry, choose low-fat options, avoid carbs. Yeah. And in the short term, some of those strategies produce results. Of course, the scale goes down. The person, they feel like it's working. But here's what actually is happening underneath. When caloric intake drops below what the body needs to function, particularly protein and total energy, The body responds by protecting itself. It downregulates the metabolism. It holds onto fat stores as a survival mechanism. It prioritizes essential functions and then deprioritizes everything else. In women, everything else includes thyroid function, hormone production, energy regulation, mental clarity, mood stability, and hair health, which means the undereating woman doesn't just stall on weight loss. She gains weight. She loses hair. She experiences brain fog. She feels exhausted. Her mood becomes unstable. She looks at all those symptoms and thinks she needs to try harder, eat less, restrict more. She doubles down on the exact strategy that's causing the problem. That's the undereating trap. And Kelli, well, she was squarely in the middle of it. I want to be specific about the foods Kelli was eating because I think it illustrates something important. Fruit, yogurt, and dairy, sure, they're not inherently bad foods. They're not the enemy. But for Kelli's specific body, specific goals, and specific circumstances, they were the wrong emphasis. And here's why. The macronutrient most critical to everything Kelli needed, metabolism support, satiety, brain function, muscle maintenance, post-surgical recovery, is protein. And fruit, yogurt, and dairy, they're not on their own high-protein foods necessarily. Fruit is primarily carbohydrate and water. Yogurt, sure, has some protein, but most commercial yogurts, which is what Kelli was having, are low protein and high sugar. Dairy varies, but in the quantities Kelli was eating, it, wasn't really providing her with what her body needed. She was eating regularly but underfueling in the specific macronutrient that her body was desperately requesting. And because she also skipped breakfast, the meal that the signal is the strongest, her body was starting each day in a deficit and it spent the rest of the day trying to compensate for it. This created a cycle of low energy in the morning, poor food choices later in the day driven by hunger, and a metabolic environment that was actively resisting fat loss. Now, none of this was her fault. She was doing exactly what she'd been taught. She just hadn't been taught enough. So, here is what we changed in the order we changed it. Pillar 1. The undereating trap, diagnosing it specifically for Kelli and understanding what her body actually needed. Pillar 2, the fuck-free Flexi Food Framework, building a nutritional structure flexible enough for a busy mum of 2, anchored in protein and designed to support rather than fight her body. Pillar 3, recovery fueling, addressing the specific nutritional needs of a body that had been through 2 major surgeries and wasn't actually done recovering. Let me take you through each one. The first thing I do with any client who presents with Kelli's pattern, eating what they believe as well, not losing weight, low energy brain fog, is look at the actual numbers. Not to put them on a calorie target, but to understand what their body is working with. When I looked at what Kelli was eating across a typical day, the picture was really clear. She was eating well below her body's energy requirements. She was getting a fraction of the protein she needed, and because she was skipping breakfast, well, her body was spending the first 3 or 4 hours of every single day just running on empty. Here is the practical test I use to assess whether someone is in the under-eating trap. So ask yourself these 3 questions. 1, do I regularly skip breakfast or eat something minimal in the morning? Question number 2, is protein the primary component of my meals or is it just an afterthought? Question number 3, do I find myself craving sugar, carbohydrates, or caffeine in the afternoon? If you answered yes to 2 or more of those, you are likely undereating in the specific macronutrient that your body needs the most, and your afternoon cravings are your body's distress signal. Kelli, well, she answered yes to all 3. The first and most important change we made was deceptively simple. We installed breakfast, not a complicated breakfast though, not a meal prep masterpiece, but a protein-anchored meal within an hour of waking every single day, non-negotiable. For Kelli, given that she was a busy mum with 2 young kids and morning chaos was just part of the deal, we kept this really, really manageable. Scrambled eggs, high-protein Greek yogurt with maybe protein powder stirred in if she needed it, cottage cheese and some fruit, a protein smoothie in the most chaotic mornings. So the rule was simple. Protein first, and then add whatever fits in around it. The effect of this single change within the first 2 weeks was profound. Her mid-morning energy, well, it improved. Her afternoon cravings reduced. She was making clearer decisions later in the day because her blood sugar was no longer crashing before 10 o'clock in the morning. One habit installed consistently, visible impact within 2 weeks. This is what working with the right inputs looks like rather than fighting the symptoms. Here is the part that was the hardest for Kelli to accept, and I suspect it will be the part that's hardest for some of you watching to accept too. We increased how much she was eating. Not dramatically, not recklessly, but deliberately and purposefully, specifically her protein intake and her overall daily calories to a level that supported her activity as a busy mum of 2 and her body's recovery needs. Now, her instinct was to push back. If I eat more, won't I gain more weight? And this is the trap. This is the belief that keeps women stuck for years, decades in some cases, because the answer, when the body has been underfueled, is almost always no. When you give your metabolism the fuel it needs to function, it starts to function. When it starts to function, it starts to process food the way it's designed to. And when that happens, well, the body composition shifts, and often very, very quickly. Within the first 3 weeks, Kelli's energy was improving. By week 4, she'd messaged me to say that the brain fog was lifting and the weight that she'd been trying to lose for months before we started, it had begun to move. Without restriction, without suffering, without a single day of going hungry. The second pillar is the nutritional framework, and I want to start by explaining why I built it to be flexible rather than precise, because I think the instinct for most people is to believe that stricter equals better. It doesn't. Kelli, she's a 40-year-old mum of 2 young kids. Her mornings involved packed lunches, school runs, and whatever minor crisis is happening that day. Her afternoons involve pickups, homework, dinner, bedtime routines. Her evenings are the first quiet moment she gets. And then she's often too tired to be genuinely restful. A nutrition plan that requires exact portions, precise meal timing, and 0 deviation is not a plan for Kelli's life. It's a plan for someone else's life. You know, a plan that will survive for approximately 2 weeks before the reality of 2 small children and a full household makes it impossible to maintain. What Kelli needed was a framework, a set of principles she could apply flexibly in any situation, not a script she had to follow word for word. The Fuck-Free Flexi Food Framework works on 4 principles. Principle 1, protein is the anchor of every meal, not the whole meal, the anchor. Every time Kelli sat down to eat, the first decision was, where's the protein in this meal? Everything else was built around that one decision. Now, protein managed to satiety, protects lean muscle tissue, stabilizes blood sugar, and critically for Kelli, supports the cellular repair process that was still active post-surgery. Now, it's not a diet concept, it's a functional nutrient that her body was desperately short of. Principle 2, structure without the script. So we established a simple eating rhythm, breakfast, lunch, an afternoon snack and dinner, not as a rigid schedule, but as a daily anchor. Regularly eating and intervals prevented the energy crashes and reactive food decisions that were coming from going too long without fuel. Principle 3, food quality over food rules. We shifted the focus from what am I not allowed to eat to, okay, what is this meal doing for my body? Now, that reframe, I guess, sounds small, right? But it changes everything about how a person makes food decisions, from defensive and anxious to confident and purposeful. Principle number 4, real-life navigation built in. We specifically worked through the scenarios that were the hardest for Kelli, the rush school mornings, the work lunches, the family dinners where she was cooking for 4 people with completely different preferences, the nights when she was just way too tired to cook properly. And for each one, we built a decision tree, a default, a good enough option that was better than whatever she defaulted to before. Here is why Kelli described the weight loss as effortless, and I think this matters because, effortless is a word that gets associated with gimmicks and quick fixes, and this was neither. It felt effortless because, for the first time, Her nutrition was working with her body rather than against it. She wasn't fighting hunger. She wasn't fighting cravings. She wasn't fighting the urge to eat things she told herself she wasn't allowed. She was simply eating in a way that kept her full, kept her energized, kept her blood sugar stable, and gave her body what it needed to repair and function properly. When that happens, weight loss isn't a battle, it's a byproduct. That is what the right nutritional structure produces. Not suffering, not restriction, results as natural consequences of getting the inputs right. The third pillar of Kelli's program is one I want to address specifically because I think it's almost completely overlooked in standard post-surgical care. When you have surgery, particular major surgery under general anaesthetic, your body goes through a significant physiological event. The surgical trauma, it triggers an inflammatory response. The anaesthetic, it places a load on the liver and metabolic systems. The recovery period, it requires substantial cellular repair. Now, all of that requires nutritional support. Actually, it requires specific nutritional support. And yet, in most cases, post-surgical patients are given instructions about wound care medications and activity restrictions. They're given almost nothing about nutrition for recovery. Kelli had 2 surgeries in 18 months. She came to me still in a physiological state of recovery, not from a specific surgery, but from the cumulative stress of 2 major procedures on a body that was simultaneously underfueled and overextended. Her brain fog wasn't a mystery. Her fatigue wasn't a mystery. Her body was in a state of repair deficit, demanding resources that it wasn't being given. Recovery fueling is not a specific diet. It's a targeted nutritional emphasis, specifically giving the body the raw materials it needs to complete the repair processes that surgery initiates. The key nutrients for post-surgical recovery are protein, the most important because it's the building block of tissue repair, vitamin C, which supports collagen synthesis and wound healing, zinc, which is critical for immune function and cellular repair, and omega-3 fatty acids, which help regulate the inflammatory response that triggers through surgery. For Kelli, we address this significantly by increasing her protein intake, which was the single most important lever, and by systematically improving the quality and diversity of our overall diet to ensure the macronutrients that support recovery were consistently present. We also address sleep. Now, sleep is when the majority of cellular repair occurs, and a body that's underfueled, managing 2 small children and nutritionally depleted, well, it's almost always also sleep compromised. Not just because of the children, but because the physiological state itself disrupts sleep architecture. Improving her nutrition improved her sleep. Improving her sleep accelerated her recovery, and accelerating her recovery lifted the brain fog, restored her energy, and allowed everything else in the program to work more effectively. About 5 weeks into the program, Kelli sent me a message that I think captures the essence of what recovery fueling produced. She said, "I feel like my body is finally healing. I don't know how else to describe it. I just feel like things are moving in the right direction instead of getting worse." Now, that's not a weight loss statement. That's a quality of life statement. And I think it's the more important one, because what Kelli was experiencing wasn't just fat loss, it was genuine systemic recovery. Her body, well, it was rebuilding itself with the resource that it had finally been given to do so. The weight loss, sure, it was real, 10 kilos across 12 weeks, but the brain fog clearing, the energy returning, the ability to run around with her kids and feel present and capable, that was a result that mattered most for her. And none of it required her to eat less. It required her to eat better. Here is exactly how the 12 weeks progressed for Kelli. Week 1 and 2, breakfast installation, a protein-rich breakfast within an hour of waking every day. We also ran a full nutritional assessment and identified her specific under-eating pattern, and nothing else changed while she was establishing this single habit. Weeks 3 and 4, we introduced the full fuck-free Flexi Food Framework, protein anchoring at every single meal, the eating rhythm. We increased her protein overall and the intake to a level her body needed. and her energy began to improve noticeably. Weeks 5 through 8. Recovery fueling emphasis. We added the micronutrient focus, vitamin C, zinc, omega-3s. We worked on sleep hygiene. The brain fog began to lift. She reported feeling, week by week, progressively more like herself. Weeks 9 through to 12, consolidation and confidence building. The framework was becoming habitual. Food decisions were faster and less effortful. Her weight was continuing to move. We worked through the specific real-life scenarios she found most challenging. The family dinners, the exhausted evenings, the social situations. End of week 12. Weight loss described as effortless. Brain fog cleared. Energy significantly improved. Able to keep up with her children. A much happier person. Her words, not mine. If Kelli's story is your story, if you're eating what you think is well and still not seeing results, if brain fog is a daily companion, if you're exhausted in a way that sleep doesn't seem to fix, here's where to start. Day 1 through 7, install breakfast. Non-negotiable, protein-rich every morning. If you do nothing else in the first week, do this. Week 2, audit your protein. Look at what you're actually eating across the day and ask honestly, is protein the anchor of this meal or an afterthought? If it's an afterthought, well, that's your first fix. Week 3, if you've had surgery in the last 2 or 3 years and are experiencing fatigue, brain fog, or unexplained weight gain, consider whether you're still in a recovery deficit. Speak to your GP or health professional. Ask specifically about post-surgical nutritional support, because you may find it's a significant piece of the puzzle. Week 4, build your real life default. Identify the 2 or 3 situations where your food choices consistently let you down and build a simple decision for each one in advance. Not a rigid plan though, a default. Let me give you the full picture. In 12 weeks, weight loss consistently and described as effortless. Brain fog significantly reduced and ultimately cleared. Energy rebuilt to a level she hadn't experienced since before her surgeries. Mood improved. She described herself as a much happier person. Ability to keep up with her 6 and 7-year-old children, fully restored. Confidence in food decisions built from the ground up. She now makes choices at restaurants and in social situations without anxiety or confusion. Breakfast installed as a permanent daily habit. And the overall shift? Kelli now describes her body as something that's repairing and improving rather than something that's breaking down and fighting her. That relationship with your body, that shift from adversary to ally, it's worth more than any number on the scale. Before the fuck-free Flexi Food Framework, Kelli's approach was eat fruit, yogurt, and dairy, skip breakfast, reduce calories, keep trying. Her results? Weight gain, brain fog, depleted energy, feeling worse each month. After the framework, more food, not less. Protein as the anchor, structured eating rhythm, recovery-focused micronutrients. Her result? 10 kilos lost, brain fog cleared, energy rebuilt, a happier life. The inputs changed, everything else followed. 3 pillars, 1 transformation. Pillar 1, the under-eating trap. Diagnose whether your body is underfueled in the specific nutrients it needs, because restriction that looks like discipline is often the thing creating the problem. Pillar 2, the fuck-free Flexi Food Framework. Build a flexible nutritional structure anchored in protein that works in the real conditions of your actual life. Pillar 3, recovery fueling. If your body's been through surgery, significant illness, or prolonged stress, it has specific nutritional needs that go beyond standardized dietary advice. And meeting those needs isn't optional, it's foundational. If you take one thing from Kelli's story, you cannot out-restrict a body that's in recovery mode. You cannot willpower your way through a nutritional deficit. The only way out is through, and through means giving your body what it needs to function, repair, and regulate. Eating more was not a cheat code. It was the correct answer. And for many of you watching, it may be your correct answer too. If Kelly's story resonated with you, if the brain fog, the exhaustion, the eating healthy but not going anywhere pattern feels familiar, I want to help you find your answer. And the quiz, well, it's the fastest way to get there. The link below, it takes you to the Fix Your Mojo quiz, our free 2-minute diagnostic that identifies exactly what's getting in the way of your results and points you straight to the fix. The quiz identifies what's getting in the way for your specific situation, the under-eating trap, and figure out whether the Fuck-Free Flexi Food Framework is the right fit for where you are now. No sign-up required, no pitch, just clarity on what your body actually needs. So the quiz link is in the description below, and it takes 2 minutes, but the results, they're immediate. And if this video was useful, if it explains something you've been trying to understand for a while, please share it with someone who needs to hear it, particularly any mum you know who is working incredibly hard and getting nowhere, because this might just be the missing piece. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.